May 2019. And we're starting on time. Thank you all. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am calling the May 2019 Village of Ossining Zoning Board of Appeals public hearing to order. I ask that you please turn off your cell phones. For those in the audience, please do not engage in activities that may distract the board or the applicants or their respective representatives. Please do not engage in loud or extended conversations during the proceedings. Any conversations by audience members should be conducted outside of the hearing room. At the end of the applicant's presentation, the public will be given an opportunity to speak on relevant issues involving that application. And as many of you know, we then will close the public hearing for that particular application. We'll discuss, and if it's proper to vote on that application tonight, we will. And we have done a little bit of reversing on the agenda. We're taking the new business first, and we'll take the continuing business second. Remember that this is a public hearing. ZBA 0816 Evergreen Contracting, New York LLC, 3 Butler Place. Application is seeking approval for a setback adjustment previously approved construction of a single-family dwelling.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. Oh, name and address, please.
Scott Gallery, one of the owners of Evergreen Contracting, in regards to 3 Butler Place. I assume everybody has the paperwork that I turned in. The bigger one is the one that we were previously approved for with the zoning board and the village. If you look at the measurements from the middle points to the house, it's 10 feet to the neighbor, 16 feet to Butler Place. Going by that plan, we set the house according to that. If you take the measurements, everybody was assuming, myself as one, the architect, and I think as well as the board, that the property's only 48 feet wide, it's not 50 feet wide. So when we set the house and it was all said and done, we came up short of 7 inches on one side and 3 inches on the other side, only on the front corners of the house. The middle of the house where we originally submitted is still the same. The rear of the property actually measures more than what was required. So we're asking the board for a slight adjustment so we can get a CO. We have a buyer for the house and we'd like to close.
Great. Good to hear. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on 3 Butler Place? Okay, so I need a motion to close the public hearing on 3 Butler Place.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Yes, opposed, none. So, all right, is there any discussion on this? We're talking about
Pretty
inches
cut and
here.
dry.
I'm good.
Okay,
I believe it is such a de minimis variance that I think anyone would be hard pressed to deny it. You know, I have no objection to these small variations.
so let's take a vote. Do I have a vote to approve the variance request for ZBA 0816, 3 Butler Place? A motion?
Make a motion, we approve variance.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Jamie, thank you.
CBA 0118 Hudson Point LLC, 65 North Malcolm Street. Don't see anything there. We'll come back to this because we are notoriously start late, so I'm going to give people a little bit of time, but I'll come back to this one, okay? ZBA 2218 Ossining Volunteer Ambulance Corp, 2 Clinton Avenue. Once again.
James teacher's here.
We're gonna get you.
ZBA 0719, 38 James Street.
There you go.
Yeah, got it.
No, I'm stuck in my seat. Hello.
Your name and address, sir, please.
Luis Saavedra, 38 James Street, Ossining, New York. I guess I'm here because there were mistakes made. Foundation poured and the building was going to be, I had a variance of 3 feet on both sides, and 5 feet on the back side. And it's, I think it's 4 inches, 2 feet, 8 inches on the right side, and A side it's 2 feet, 8 inches, and in the back side it's 3
Are you the
feet.
Tesla owner?
Yes. 3 feet.
Is that building bigger than we approved?
No, same thing. Nothing's changed in the building.
Joe, is that building bigger than what we allowed him to put in?
It's the exact same thing.
What kind of building is it? Tesla or Tesla?
No, he was gonna park his cars out in the street, because this was gonna be family, but it's gonna be a garage, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Looks bigger.
it's a metal building,
It's
so.
proposed as a garage
Can you
to
get rid of
meet,
this,
to meet the zoning code for square footage, and then it was changed from what originally was planned to him buying prefabricated metal. Then he went back to the BAR and they approved the proposed metal structure rather than what originally was a wood structure, but it's proposed still to be the same size.
okay.
Yeah,
Maybe it's just the drawing that makes it look so much bigger, but,
Yeah.
it was supposed to end up to be after he was denied, the first time, it was supposed to be a 2-car garage.
Right.
It is still a two-car garage.
Okay.
That's why it's metal, I mean,
That just looks like it's taking up
And-
more
and-
yard.
And the changes were originally, the submittal was the building was actually turned where the narrow side was facing the other way. And then he switched it to this side, and then he got variances, and now they put the foundation in, and the survey came back not meeting what was granted
And
originally.
what is it, 5 inches on each side? You're short?
yeah, it's too close to the fence. It was, the previous variance was 3 feet on both sides.
And you're 2.5?
5 feet in the back. And it's 2 feet, 8 inches on the right side and 2 feet, 4 inches on, let's see. Two feet,
But this is the same.
2 feet,
size.
5 inches.
19, yeah, that's,
It says 22 by 34, it's supposed to be the same size. It's still
Same
the
size.
Okay.
Okay, so, and across the back, you're okay, in the back?
Yeah, the back was a, well, it wasn't even a variance, it was just 5 feet.
Oh,
But now I'm going for a variance because it's 4 feet, it's 5.8 inches. So I'm putting a variance of 3 feet on each side, 2 feet on each side and 4 feet on the back side.
okay, I should have asked if anybody's here to talk about it.
Well,
what did we,
I just wanna,
see, I'm just trying to read the worksheet, because it's confusing in the worksheet, to compare. When we granted, before we granted, because I have to look at the prior resolution.
Right.
We granted 3 feet, so
Yeah.
now he's looking for 2, okay.
yeah,
Yes.
and then,
It's 2 feet 8 inches.
if it was,
It's
if
2 feet 8
if
inches.
the other one was 3 feet, yet there was nothing on the
Yeah.
other side, and
Yeah.
now he's looking for both sides, that would make it a bit different.
Is this as built? You built it already, right? It's all
The
done?
foundation is done,
The foundation.
Foundation's done.
yeah. So
Okay.
I met with Joe and he recommended,
Yeah.
he gave me 2 options, put it up and see what happens, or bring it here.
And apologize later, you mean?
Yeah, so I said, no, I'll just bring it here like.
You should
like
bring it
said.
here because you don't want to have to take it down.
Yeah, I don't wanna fight you guys,
Well,
so.
I don't know if you were here, but this was a big thing.
All right. Well, he probably did the right thing coming in.
So, as long as the building is the same size that we approved, that was approved by the planning board, and we gave the variance on it, and we're talking about 5 inches and 4 inches, which is different from the last building.
Yeah, the building structure has, well, the metal, it's the only thing that's changed.
In this
Yeah.
time, but your previous your building with your rec room and that previous whole building thing. Remember that? I remember.
No, I don't remember.
Well, you already
Because it was
granted
never-
his variances,
My
right?
son was here one time.
Oh, it was the son that came?
But it was the rec room, that's
No,
right.
no, this is a whole, we're just going back in history now, so.
Actually, it was never proposed as a rec room.
Well, then it could, then it would just.
It was always garage with storage.
No, that's not true.
You originally came to the board because you proposed a 900 square foot accessory.
Oh, yes.
structure.
Yes.
Yes, oh, yeah, way back then, yeah.
Yes, yes.
This is 4 years ago or something.
Yes.
As soon as it was 38 James again, I said, well, you got, okay. So this is just because the survey, there wasn't a survey done before, or?
Well, what he could have done was had the surveyor come out and stake it out to what was granted as the variances, but that wasn't the case.
Okay,
And then what I requested was, when you put in the foundation, before you put the structure on it, to get a foundation survey to make sure you're gonna be meeting the variances that were granted. And when the survey came back, it did not.
okay.
So, before the structure was.
Because
put-
very likely the metal building was, which is prefab, was different than the stick building he was gonna put up.
And the option was, as I said, if you come to the zoning board and for whatever reason you would deny, you can correct it before you put the building up.
And we just want to make this an example of, we remember everything. And we remember
Actually,
all the times you came before us.
Actually, I actually forgot about that
Ah,
900
yeah.
square feet.
Okay.
Would have been nice, but
Okay, is there anyone here to speak on 38 James Street? Okay, not seeing anyone. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing on 38 James Street?
Motion to close?
Yes. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, so this is pretty minor too, like the last one was. Do I have a motion to approve the new variances?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Again, this is very de minimis, and I don't think it's a substantial variation from what was approved.
thank you. Now my wife will let me back in my house. My yard is a mess. Thank you, guys. Take care.
Thank you,
welcome.
Mr. Saavedra.
I'd like to just check if anyone is here from 65 North Malcolm. And is anyone here from the ambulance corps? Okay, we'll move on. CBA 0218, 49 Spring Street. They're smart, they're staying back there. Your name and address, please.
J.B. Hernandez, architect for the project, 102nd Boulevard, Ossining, New York. Well, we're in front of the board the last time in March. Since then, I know the board had some requests about the parking information, and what we have done is we have gone to the planning board, and we're requesting a waiver from them.
So, I don't know, can you hear him, Catherine?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want you to explain that because you're a downtown property,
Yes,
what happens? You can go to the planning board for a waiver, right?
yes, that's what we've done.
All right, so that the parking variance request is off the table right now.
Right.
So why don't you speak on the variance that you're looking for?
We're looking for a variance for setback for the where we require a 20-foot feet minimum setback from the Croton Aqueduct, we are requesting that reduced to 8 feet.
Okay. Is there anyone here to speak on 49 Spring Street? Over? Yes, ma'am, why don't you come up?
Didn't we already have the public hearing on this? Oh, or we continue?
We didn't close it, yeah.
I'm Sarah Kelsey, I'm with the Friends of the Old Croton Aqueduct, and I'm here to advocate on behalf of the aqueduct. It's a very, very beautiful property, and the Village of Ossining wisely has set forth a 25-foot buffer zone around the actual property. And in its comprehensive plan, it names the Old Croton Aqueduct as a very important trail and part of the heritage tourism efforts of Ossining. If the building is built closer to the aqueduct than that 25-foot buffer, it just makes it uglier. It cuts off the sunlight. It's a 4-story building. I'm confused a little bit about, it looks like he's only going back the 8 feet on the first floor. In the other floors of the 4-floor building are still flush with the trail, but even if that were not the case, 8 feet back is not enough. So, you know, I'm just here to advocate for that, hoping that you all will see that it's in the interest of Ossining to have this beautiful trail. I took some recent pictures of the trail. It's been opened up behind the house. It's just lovely. And if that big building is just that close to the trail, it will cut off the sunlight and really not be as beautiful. So that's about it.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak on the 49? Just leave it with the thing. Is there anyone else here to speak on 49 Spring Street? All right, a couple of clarifications, please. Let's close the public hearing. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
So now we'll have our discussion. Clarify that the other floors are not going flush with the aqueduct.
No.
How many buildings in that row are 25 feet back from the aqueduct? If you walked behind
I believe
from that building on Spring Street all the way down,
I believe none.
is this possibly the last property that could possibly be built on that? Because the next is the bus stop.
Right, and in
Yeah.
fact,
That's
I've spoken with someone from the.
Make sure you talk into the mic.
I apologize. I spoke with the folks with regard to the parks from the state in terms of maintenance of the particular location. One of the things that they are interested in doing is perhaps taking down a portion of the fence to in fact open it up more in the area. But I should point out, the state has been notified about this application and you know, they have not, you know, indicated anything. And Madam Chair, as you know, the applicant did, at your request, lay out where everything would be, and I know Member Sproat was there one day that we visited the site with regard to where it is in terms of where the other buildings are on that particular stretch of the aqueduct.
Stuart, when you said that they haven't, the state hasn't said anything, you mean in regards to whether it's parkland alienation? Or?
No. We had a question because, Greg, there are a number of trees that were basically falling down.
Mm-hmm.
So the question was, who's responsible for the trees?
Right.
It's basically the village's responsibility, so we've actually, you know, retained an arborist to go out and tell us what has to be done. Because there was a written agreement many years ago. We basically just continued the agreement since that time, but nothing in terms of alienation or anything like that. What they were simply saying is that there's one of the fence areas they thought might be better to take it down because it would open it up more behind the bus stop in terms of being more of a green area. So that's something that we'll have further discussions with the new park superintendent for the aqueduct with regard to that. But what I was saying is in terms of the actual application, they have not, other than being apprised of it, they've not, you know, notified us of any objection to it.
But I think it's important to state that, you know, I'm not sure, I have walked the entire aqueduct twice, because I had the privilege of having both of my sons have Mr. O in school, which means you walked the entire aqueduct, and it was fabulous. But as you walk through the communities, when you walk in the downtown areas, it's totally different than when you're walking like behind, you know, like where Avalon is and Audubon and, what's not Audubon?
Avalon.
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 Avalon is where you have that open area. And when you go into the different other communities too, where it's goes through the downtown area, the buildings are closer to the aqueduct than the 25 feet. I love the aqueduct, I think it's fabulous. And as I said before, I've walked it, and this whole application has brought to the front that we opened up, it was opened up more with opening up those gates, that people can walk down there, and if you go down to the end of that street, you can actually look up, and it's very beautiful. I'm not, so I just wanted to state that, you know, but, so nothing would be closer than 8 feet to the aqueduct, right? Then there's the aqueduct.
Yeah.
The house on the other side does not have a 25-foot buffer either, so.
No, we took a physical inspection of the area and walked the area where this building is going to be. And there certainly isn't going to be an undesirable change because all of the other buildings are almost butt up to the aqueduct. There's no 25-foot buffer in any of the buildings there. I do not believe, we did not see anything. And I don't know if you want to call it substantial. It's a little more than, I mean, it's 8 feet and you need 25, but I don't particularly myself have an objection to granting this. And I believe, I have been on the aqueduct riding my bike, and there are beautiful areas, but in this downtown area, there's a lot of activity and businesses and people just using that section of the aqueduct behind this building as basically a pass-through area, almost like a path instead of going out around on the sidewalk, it appears. And it needed to be some little bit, looks like maybe people throw a little bit of trash and things like that, so it looks like it is just kind of a sidewalk to get from point A to point B on the aqueduct trail there in the village.
What would the owner propose to do in that 8-foot buffer so that it didn't diminish the views and the, you know, and the ability?
Good evening, Pedro
Good
Silva.
evening.
Well, we could make it plant trees,
Yeah,
if you want.
I want to see what he would like to.
What do you have, any
I
plans?
think it's the best way to get it. In the back, it's evergreens, like the tall ones, like the,
Some trees?
Like an arborvitae or
Exactly,
something like that.
that's right.
Something a little more mature,
Yep.
probably.
right? Instead to get it like 4 or 5 feet, you get it like 7 feet.
Right, but
In the beginning of the plantation, so you're not gonna get it like a conflict all the time in order to get them.
yeah, they'll grow it.
Exactly,
But
we grow very
no
fast
problem. When
actually.
you first came here, you made adjustments to this, the
Yes.
original,
Yes, we
the
have-
original
Yes.
application.
We
You
have-
actually made it,
8 feet.
so you gave us the 8 feet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Bob,
correct.
initially it was right up.
It was right on there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I remember.
Well, it's just the south side is an angle, but now it's like
Right.
Yeah.
totally
No,
one.
it used to about 2, and that was the.
Yeah.
Will the fence be replaced?
Excuse me?
Will the fence be replaced?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because
Oh, yeah.
we
But-
wouldn't want people to be able to hide
No, no,
behind
no.
the shrubs.
No, like another building. I replaced the fence there definitely, it's all new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you replaced the fence in the building next door?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, that was a different fence.
You have to ask her.
She's raising her hand.
Oh, sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Wanted
You want to
say-
come up to the microphone, please?
Oops, sorry.
The building next door actually is farther back from the aqueduct, but there's a fence that's sort of right up to the aqueduct, and behind the fence, there's there's low concrete structures, there are garbage cans, but the actual building that's next door, as you can see, is farther back. You can see at the top of the left-hand side building there at the top, it's just cement pallet and cement block But actually, that even though we would love it if you did not have garbage facing the aqueduct like that building does, at least that building is far enough away so the sunlight still gets in more because those garbage structures are low. Similarly.
Well, you know it's a garbage structure.
I couldn't see it from the
You
aqueduct.
cannot see from
You
anywhere.
cannot see that from the
And actually,
aqueduct.
the garbage structure, one of them, you got AC on.
We're gonna ask you both to direct your
Right, to the
Right, I'm
comments
sorry,
to
I'm
the
sorry, I
board.
apologize.
Because there's
Okay,
building
excuse
down.
me,
so
it's air conditioning.
Sure.
But it's ugly,
Well, I
but
think
it's
that- I
low.
think-
My point was it's low, which is good.
Mm.
Well, I don't know how the sun gets in there because of that building, because that is a 4-foot building, a 4-story building
But it's
anyway.
back from the trail.
Yeah, but one of the things that we do have
The
there
buffer
is
is
that there,
concerned.
this is the end. This would be the last building, because the next thing is the bus depot, and then the street is right there.
That's
So,
correct.
You know, so there is an opening up that,
Yeah.
for the sunlight and the stuff to get in. I would be concerned, where do you propose to put your garbage in this building?
The garbage for
Yeah.
that building,
Yeah.
it got to be in the basement.
In the basement?
Mhm. There's a small section in the back, it got to be a basement for the mechanical,
Uh-huh.
and you got also for the garbage.
So it will never be out in the
No,
visible?
no.
And the other thing we like, if possible, is not to have tall trees, but to have lower shrubs, again, to give that spaciousness, if that's possible.
Well, if you want to have some kind of buffer between you, a 6-foot arborvitae is as tall as he is. So
Mhm.
that, that's, you know.
See.
Yeah, that's,
I'm a five-
no insult.
No taller than you. None tall as Marcel. That's.
I don't know what you plant, I don't know how tall arborvitae grow.
Listen,
I've never had luck with them, so I.
personally, this whole sunlight thing, it's not gonna make a difference what tree you put back there.
I think
because
it
the
just
building-
meant
it's just
for green.
For a buffer.
Yeah, just
That's all it has,
green,
nothing to do
so
with
you see
sunlight.
green.
So when you're walking
the
Well, I'll be in
entire
the sunlight.
No,
I mean,
I'm-
she
I'm
wants it
referring
low.
To what she's saying as far as blocking the sunlight.
Yeah,
The building goes up, it's done.
correct.
So this is just a buffer.
But if she wants low bushes, I don't know how big arborvitae get. Do they get,
Arborvitae.
They get very
They get
big.
big.
so then that's not what you want to recommend that he put
Yeah,
there probably.
it's not only sunlight, although love sunlight, but it's also a feeling of spaciousness, not having a canyon. like-
How wide is the aqueduct right there?
That's a good point. Does it show on that thing?
Gonna be at least.
The aqueduct property is pretty,
It actually widens out for a large area there and then
Yeah.
it goes back down
yeah.
as you continue
Yeah,
behind the
I'm not
behind the
exactly
bus
sure.
depot.
It would say on a city tax map. Yes,
I
it
believe
would.
it's 50 feet wide.
It gets very
In
wide
that
behind
area.
that building
I don't
think
and then
it's
it juts back in
Narrows.
and narrows down. We walked it, so, a couple of times,
Mhm.
just
Well,
for,
good, thank you.
you're welcome.
Well, we want to do our due diligence on it too.
Well,
and
it's
that-
such
and
a
that-
beautiful
It is.
thing because it helps the people circulate within the village in a beautiful way out of the traffic.
Right.
Children
You're
use
right,
it.
can be 50.
I agree, and it continues through.
Yeah,
But where it goes through the village, there's really not a lot of 25-foot buffers in a lot of that area.
Oh, look at that, we're
Listen.
measuring with our little tape.
okay. Look
Impressive.
at that.
Well, I can't read it, it's 35 feet?
35.7 and a half.
So 35 feet wide is a nice pathway for a bike or someone that's walking or
It's the
running.
size of a roadway, I think by law they're 33 feet.
What we would
Size
like
of
to
a
see is,
two-lane road.
what we'd like to see is that everyone maintain behind their buildings so that there isn't garbage dropped, if we can get a program like a little parks program going there,
Well, I suggested summer interns.
did you?
I did, they always get
Look at
summer
Joe.
interns, and you know what? They need something to do, don't they?
Yeah.
So you might get summer interns maybe to help you out in that section, I don't know, we'll see.
To help us with
Clean
what?
up, keep it rubbish free or whatever.
Yeah.
It's been, since it's been opened up, it's been a lot better.
Oh, it has been, there's no comparison.
There used to be even maybe somebody living there, but since it's been
Yeah.
opened up,
Yeah.
and the
I think they're
parks,
still there.
the parks has an agreement with
Correct.
Ossining, whereby Ossining is responsible for the upkeep of that trail. But we do.
As we well know.
But the Friends of the Old Croton Aqueduct do sponsor trail cleanups.
Yeah.
And we usually have people who live in the community participate because we find that then they stop other people from littering afterwards because they
Right.
cleaned it up.
Excellent.
So that's what we do.
So, you know, we can look at this a couple of ways. We can look at this as finishing off, completing our, you know, that part of the village, because we have so many open spaces in our village now that we don't have any you know, it's not consistently with shops and, you know, buildings on it. And, you know, I think there's a difference between if they were actually building on the Croton, look at that building up there. Ooh. What building is that?
For me.
That was an existing building.
We
Yeah.
won't talk about that one.
Oh, I know
It's
what
an
building
existing
that is.
building.
Never mind.
There are many that are on.
Well, there's probably some that
There's a different
predate the
case.
buffer, because I think the buffer might have been
Oh,
created.
I'm sure a lot of
I
them
think in
do.
every community, the downtown is just and I have no problems with the 25-foot buffer in other areas, like when you're walking that whole path and you're walking down, you know, like they do the 5K run, you know, through a lot of the aqueduct too. Okay, well, thank you, ma'am, for your input.
One more thing is, this is not just downtown, it's next to the weir, which is a major tourist attraction. Hundreds of people go through the weir, and they come down from the Croton Dam, they go into the weir, they continue on the trail. And so it's a major tourist attraction.
Well, what I like about where this particular, where the aqueduct comes out onto the spring,
Mhm.
onto Spring Street right there, is that it opens it up for them to come and not only walk down the aqueduct, but also to shop in our shops. And
Yeah, we
to be-
stopped right there at the Sing Sing Kill Brewery.
That's right, 'cause it's right there. So, and I just want to point out, the weir is up by the community center, so
Yes.
it's a little distance away.
It's up
So,
here.
but we would love people to come down the whole aqueduct.
They do.
And if you go into that kind of convoluted area where, around Maple House, you know, where you have where you cross the street and then you have to go through that back entrance and stuff. So I think we should all work harder on keeping the aqueduct clean and, you know.
But of course, you run
use
up
it.
against revitalization of the little downtown area
Yeah.
and continued growth of the village of Ossining, competing with your wanting to keep the 25-foot buffer on one kind of last parcel there that could be built upon. So you have a little conflict there, so you have to kind of decide which would
Yes.
be best for the community.
Although I don't think of it as a zero-sum game. I think that people will want to live in your building because it's next to a jogging path.
Mhm,
There
absolutely.
you go.
They'll want to walk their dogs on the path. They'll love your building because it's on the path. So it's not a zero-sum game. But maybe if some of the things I heard about not keeping garbage out in the back and having some low vegetation would be a condition of the variance, it might be helpful.
And he said he might change the fence to make the appearance look a little nicer for you.
No, I think he was speaking about a different fence. You were talking about the fact that parks
No,
is.
they have requested that we change that fence.
Just
as
the
well.
fence right behind his
Oh, the
parcel,
fence. Oh, okay. The chain link,
Mhm.
yeah.
unless you like the chain link.
No, I don't, I really, the only good thing about the chain link fence is that they'll want a fence, and at least you can see through it, and it's solid.
Okay, I don't have any objection if you
So-
don't mind that this chain link fence.
Yeah, I don't mind this chain link fence.
Okay.
It's low and you
I
can see
think
through it.
I think we can leave this up to the parks and the building department to determine the fencing and stuff.
Yeah,
And
but I'm saying I'm
especially past
neutral.
that point where the bus stop is, because we, in a lot of places in the village and even in the town, we have replaced fencing with large rocks, you know, so people don't drive onto places like that, yet it opens it up even more. So why don't we leave it up to the powers to be to determine, but to know that they will be putting something back there, and it won't be an ugly, rusty chain link fence. It might be a new one, or it might be some other kind of fence, right?
Definitely.
Say yes. Okay, thank you, ma'am, thank you so much for participating in this. Okay. So, discussion amongst the board members?
As I say, I walked it, there's not gonna be a significant change in the area if we allow him to build that building. And I think if he puts some low bushes, and actually, he's 8 feet further away than many of the buildings in that little stretch.
I think if you look at the factors that we have, you know, in the memo, particularly
Yes,
for
let's
this.
look at our factor memo.
I don't think there's gonna be an
Stuart,
adverse impact.
Stuart, I have a question. Over here.
Oh, good God, I didn't know where you were. It's like
You know
God
where
was
the
talking
voice
to
is
me.
coming
It sounded like
Good, the speakers work.
Go ahead, Bob.
Would it be our responsibility to put a condition on putting the
Yeah.
shrubbery in there?
The shrubbery, yeah, not in terms of the garbage, because I think that's really
Right, right.
all part of it, but if you want to put something
We
that they
can
would
put
put
that as a
certain types of
condition.
shrubbery there,
Okay.
yes,
Yes.
sure.
We can put conditions on just about
Absolutely.
anything.
Yeah, you can.
So there's an undesirable change to produce the character of the neighborhood. I think that it just finishes off the village at that end of town before you get to across the street, and then you get to that little triangle building.
Yeah, there's no detriment to any of the adjoining properties by virtue of this being constructed.
Okay, the benefits sought by the applicant can be achieved by some method feasible from the applicant to pursue other than the area variance? Well, no, because it's going to 25 feet, because one of the things that did happen when we had him mark off 25 feet, which makes the property about the size of a sandwich, you know, it's like very small. The requested area variance is substantial. I'm not asking to go onto the aqueduct at all, you know, it's still 8 feet of way. No slip-ups, no coming back, no saying the building got bigger, no miscalculations allowed, correct? Okay. And the proposed variance will have an adverse effect or impact on the physical environment conditions. I think it might pick it up, make it look better. And the alleged difficulty was self-created, and that would be, it's not really self-created, it's, you know.
Well, his choice would be not to build there at all, or to build a different building, and since he already explained to us, it's not feasible for him to construct something on that site unless he gets this many apartments and gets his first floor commercial space, he wouldn't be inclined to do it. And right now, you have a vacant lot next to the bus stop. It doesn't particularly look inviting or desirable to have that in your downtown area.
Right.
So I think on balance between competing interests of the aqueduct and preserving the 25-foot buffer and the, you know, beauty of the aqueduct and being able to revitalize and have buildings built with commercial and residential, which we need in downtown Ossining, I think on balance, I'm in favor of granting the variance.
Correct?
I'm still opposed. I think there's issues with whether or not it's parkland, even though it's just a buffer zone, it's still a potential parkland alienation issue. And we as a zoning board cannot alienate parkland, so I'm a no.
Sure, so I'm in favor of it.
Marcel?
I'm going to abstain because I came in late and I didn't really hear the argument from the homeowner.
Stuart, can you speak at all on that?
I understand what Greg is saying. He is correct that you cannot alienate parkland.
Well, we know
that. But in this particular circumstance, that's not the buffer. The aqueduct is actually not the entire, like, this is a buffer to the aqueduct,
Right.
not the aqueduct itself, in terms of figuring out, because I know this was also an argument that Mr. Corky had made a while ago in terms of exactly what was the park and what was not the park. But what I can also say is this: when I had my discussions with the folks from the state, they had, again, no objection to this and never raised it, and they did not raise any alienation issue in terms of our ability to basically do away with, quote-unquote, parkland. This is, we didn't view it as parkland at this particular location because this is a buffer to the aqueduct, not the aqueduct itself.
I think one of the big changes that has happened since is that the building has been moved back the 8 feet, because originally it was right up onto the aqueduct, which would have been unacceptable, because then you'd never know, 1 inch on you, then you would be alienating parkland.
I dare say, I don't think we're gonna get another application like this in the downtown, right?
Certainly not,
Probably
not
not.
around,
Not concerning the aqueduct.
not between those 2 streets, you would not see that again,
No.
because everything else is all built in.
It's all built out.
Well, there's empty spots, but they have no, it has nothing to do with the aqueduct.
That's correct.
There's empty
Correct.
parking lots.
At that
and-
particular stretch, you wouldn't have it,
Yeah.
right?
Correct.
And other municipalities like the Village of Tarrytown, they do have the 25-foot setback, but not in their more urbanized areas. That does not apply.
Right, I
And-
just think once you set the 25 foot, then that is a designated park area, whether or not, well, it's debatable, certainly, whether or not it is. Once something becomes parkland, you can't alienate it, so if they're saying it's a buffer zone,
How did we make a private property parkland?
it's not a matter of private property. If you put a buffer zone in, then I think there's issues of it's protected land.
No, we don't own that 25-foot buffer.
No.
That's owned by private property, whoever owns their property. They just, all it says is I own up to that
Oh,
Croton
we don't know
Aqueduct.
any of it.
We don't
Oh,
own
okay.
any of it. I don't even think you have an easement.
No.
You don't even have an easement
Even
over
if-
that
even if-
25.
I thought we had the 8 feet,
Chris,
okay.
can you bring that?
No.
If you look at the
Site
tax
plan?
map, there's actually a
Yeah, if you look at
division
the-
area.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's look at the tax map.
Yeah, tax map is fine.
Sorry, let's walk back
You know,
down
along the
here.
roadways, you have an easement.
I'm good,
You
I'm
don't
good.
even have
Like
that.
to-
Because it's
I
not-
understand what you're saying, yeah.
It's not
makes
ours.
sense.
Right,
It's,
where-
it's the
Sorry.
same thing as
It's
if when you
Monday.
have when you have from the sidewalk to the curb,
Correct.
there's a natural easement for the village.
You have the
from
right of way.
They have
Yeah,
the right
it's
of
an
way.
easement.
Yeah.
This right here is the parcel that is owned by New York State Parks, right here, this long rectangle. This is their parcel, and the buffer is on their private property.
I
Right,
got it, I'm
And you
good,
see it
thank
gets
you.
wider right across from their property, it kind of squares out.
yeah.
That little piece there, it gets kind of rather wide, right behind his
So we
property.
could have all
A
5
little
of us walking
extra-
across it.
Little extra space.
Yes.
That one was-
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I
See how skinny it gets over by
was- Right.
the old Maple Street? Because that's when you walk across the street.
Yeah, it
you
gets,
go-
and actually,
and it
Yeah, there's
gets-
a driveway on it.
there are a lot of encroachments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some other villages actually use it for parking. I mean,
Yeah.
Dobbs Ferry, it's a parking lot on top. So the village in general is very respectful of the Old Croton Aqueduct. It's a beautiful pathway in the urbanized area. We don't park cars on it like some other municipal centers. It's maintained as a pedestrian pathway.
Okay, so, a motion to approve the variance, the one
I'll
variance.
make the motion to approve this variance.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain, and 1 abstain.
Okay.
So 4 yes, 1 abstain. And with the conditions that the fencing goes in and the bushes.
Would you like those approved by the Department of Planning, the types of plants, make sure, or EAC, that they're appropriate for the location?
Yeah.
Planning rec, whoever, yeah, not EAC, because that's another board.
You can have,
Yeah.
I- we have plant, it can be plant,
It's another
approved by the
Tuesday.
village. We have planting expertise.
Yeah,
We'll take care of it.
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Good evening, thank you,
Thank you.
appreciate,
Good luck.
thank you.
Okay, back to our
Back to the
agenda.
front page, right?
Is anyone here from 65 Malcolm? Is anybody here from the Ossining Ambulance Corp? For 9 Clinton?
I actually did call the Ossining ambulance, and I actually emailed the chief. Maybe they're out on call.
Yeah, it could be.
Could be that siren that we heard.
Yeah, it is an extension of an
Yeah, I see
existing.
that. Do they even have to be here to present it?
extension?
If they put in their application?
Well, they've already been granted.
Right.
variance.
Yeah,
this-
right.
This
And they
is just
came
an
once
extension.
before, didn't they?
This is because they let their variances expire, which is a whole discussion that we have to have
And they
another
said,
time.
This one, though, did
it
not.
Oh,
happened,
it didn't?
why?
This
Because of
one- this
winter
one did not
weather,
expire,
right?
Yeah, this one was, I don't know if it expired, but they got it
Oh, actually,
approved and it's for
October.
paving,
April
and
of
they
that.
couldn't pave when they
Right, because of
received
the
the
winter weather, it
variance.
was
What
frozen.
would have happened is, had we met last month, it would have been, they were within the time. So basically,
Okay.
they were,
So, well, they're in the time. You're
yeah,
talking about the
so,
ambulance corps? Yeah, and they
so-
couldn't pave in the winter, but
Because
they
they
gave
couldn't.
them the variance, it was
So-
all the asphalt.
so the
Right,
point
it's
is,
already
so
closed,
that
so-
it's really just continuing the variance. So if you wanted, we could just, you could take a vote, you could continue it for 6 months.
Yes,
Okay.
so do I have a proposal to continue the variance on, let's make sure we do the right one. ZBA 2218, Ossining Ambulance Corp., they're paving the lot that they purchased across the street from their ambulance corps.
So,
Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And we'll see North Malcolm, I guess, next month?
Yeah, because that one, they lapsed. So that's
Right.
a,
Okay.
you know, so you have your
Okay,
public hearing.
ZBA 0119, Ossining Land LLC, 34 State Street, known as Hudson Steppe.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Annie Klein. I'm an associate at Del Bello, Donnell, and Weingarten Wise in White Plains, and here on behalf of Ossining Land LLC. So this is an application for the re-granting of several area variances in connection with the project known as Hudson Steppe. The project is located at 34 State Street, 21 Drain Street, and 27 Hunter Street. It's approximately 5.9 acre property in the PWC zoning district. And the project includes the demolition of the existing manufacturing buildings, the rehabilitation of the Smith Robinson House, and the construction of 3 buildings that will contain 189 dwelling units. And the project has been designed to be a green project to preserve a lot of open space. The variances at issue here resulted from the project being redesigned in about 2013. The project was originally proposed in 2012, and during the environmental process, the fire chief and the planning board underwent and had the applicant redesign the project to what you see here. As a result, just mitigating environmental factors. And as a result of those changes, these variances were required. So the variances are required for building 2. Building 2 is, yeah, if you wanna to the side view. Yes, so building 2 includes the parking garage. And the parking garage is proposed to be an automated parking garage. So the cars are parked through a mechanized system. And it's also based on the topography of the site as it slopes down towards Hunter Street. The building, we're proposing an additional story. The building height will be 38 feet, which is below the maximum height requirement for the zone, but it's 4 stories requirement. So in dealing with the topography and leveling out the height of the building, an additional story was added as part of this design. So the variances are relating to that additional story, and then also minimizing the requirements for the parking space dimension and the aisle widths, and also the number of parking spaces that can be parallel parked at a single time. And that's because these cars will be parked through robotics, and you won't have people opening doors, you won't have driver error, so these spaces can be much smaller than are typically required in zoning ordinances.
We don't have anything to do with that, right?
Yes, we have to give
You're
a
asking for us
variance.
for the
Mhm.
variance for the parking?
Yeah, the parking
That's what you're doing?
spaces, yes. It's parking spaces and aisle width.
Okay.
There's no human traffic down here.
There's no humans will be parking the cars.
Right, well,
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying, that they pull it in and it takes it.
Yep,
There's
exactly.
no human traffic, so that's why you can
Yeah.
literally shrink it down.
Yeah, it's a much more environmentally green system. You don't have, a lot of fumes going on down there because the cars aren't driving. They're parked on these sleds, and these sleds move the cars into space.
Okay, so how many would you be allowed, and how many are you asking us?
Oh.
Just run that by quickly.
Sure, so there's 236 parking spaces, and that is what we are required under the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
So that's
And
how
are they all exiting onto James Street?
No, there's an exit onto James Street, there's also an exit onto State Street.
Where's the exit onto State Street?
The driveway in State
Right
Street is a two-way
For
driveway.
this one, hold on, there's a better one that illustrates it.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Yeah, right there.
This is
Last
state-
time you were here, you told us all the cars were going to exit onto James.
I apologize, I was incorrect. It's a two-way street, a two-way driveway off State Street, and then exit only off James Street, onto James Street.
Is it just the parking that we're considering, or there's another variance?
Also the additional story to make the building with the parking garage 5 stories,
Yeah, Christine,
instead
building
of
height.
4.
Building height.
But the part of the parking is the fact that you have 238 cars going on to very small streets, and that's why we were.
Were they all
Question.
exiting and entering, ingress and egress at the same time? or
Well,
what?
no, they won't. And actually, the way the robotics work in the garage is that it's actually 90 seconds. Takes 90 seconds for the cars to be parked.
I'm simply explaining why
Yeah.
we were questioning the traffic study.
Okay.
I was not questioning the mechanics of the
Oh,
garage.
Okay, I apologize. It just, the cars won't be able to exit, there'll be 2 cars can come up every 90 seconds. So it will, slow
So
down
that's
traffic because there will be like 90 seconds.
I think that
in between
speeds up
each.
traffic, but I think a person running to a car is longer than 90 seconds, but, 90 seconds isn't a long time.
So, how many cars can the actual machine take per time? You said 2 cars?
There are 2 elevators.
Sorry, Barnett Lieberman is here.
Please come up and introduce yourself.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to address you. I'm Barnett Lieberman. I've been the developer of this property since 2008. And one of the things we're very excited about is this parking system. And the elevators take 1 car each. There are 2. They take 1, you drive in, you leave the space, the place is scanned, so make sure there's nobody in there, no people in the cars. The car is then taken down on a skid and then deposited. So there are 2 elevators that could do that. It takes 90 seconds to retrieve a car. So when you go to the garage, sorry, it takes about 45 seconds to retrieve the car. When you go to the garage, you enter your number, the skid picks up your car and brings it to it, and it's facing out. You never have to put the car in reverse. Throughout this project, you'll never have to put the car in reverse. You drive straight. There's no fumes in the garage. There's no lighting. The ceilings don't have to be as high to accommodate people. And it's the way of the future. We are building this very proudly as a transit-oriented development. And because of its proximity to the station and the unique ability to eliminate, I think it's about 90 feet in elevation between the station and the middle of town. You'll still have to walk up, I think, 70 feet, I believe it is. And then you get in the elevator of the Hudson Street property. You then take the elevator up, and you're in that plaza, and that plaza is at the same elevation as the post office. So you can walk to the post office in 5 minutes, and you walk to the station in 5 minutes. And it's the difference in those elevations right there that allow you to do that.
Are you the owner of the property?
Yes.
That's your question, and then I will have a couple of questions.
It was answered before about no human or pedestrian traffic down there. I put my car, it's on the bottom level, it catches fire.
The fire department we addressed all the concerns of the fire department.
So what was their concerns? I'm gonna make like I don't know.
Fire suppression,
Okay.
the ability to exhaust as smoke,
Mhm.
and that was it. So fire suppression, the ability to exhaust smoke.
So I don't have to
And-
wait 45 seconds to bring the corner car up so I can put it out.
No,
Okay.
it'll be put out. It's all sprinklered, and there's
And
smoke.
that's a dry system, I'm assuming, because, or is that gonna be a heated, maintained area?
I wish Peter were here. I'm not sure. Do you recall? The architect?
So are these
Just,
apartments?
he has to say his name and.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yes. Ed Vogel from Warshauer Malusi Warshauer Architects. And regarding the dry or a wet system, either one will do the same job,
Correct.
right?
I understand.
So it is not considered heated, so it would be a dry
It'd be a
system.
dry system, okay.
Go ahead.
Practically, when, I'm sort of comparing this to elevators. If an elevator breaks down, you could use the stairs. Practically, one of these break down, or God forbid, both break down.
Cars can't use the stairs.
No, I know. So what happens?
But there are two, and that's the backup we have. We have two separate elevators, two separate systems.
So worst case scenario, it's just backlog, that's worst case scenario, okay.
Unless both go down.
Yeah, that's
If
what I
both
was-
go down, just like any garage that has an elevator, or two elevators.
Oh, so what if both go down, then what?
You have to wait till it gets repaired, just like the automated part of the system is not the elevator. The elevator is the same elevator you'd have in any garage, just has an additional scanner to make sure no one's in the car. But it's an elevator that brings cars up and down. The unique part of the system is the skids and the direction of the car and transport of the car on each level. So when it gets to that level, that's the unique part of the system. The fact that it's taken and then parked and comes back, it's another car. So the elevator is not the issue. It's the same, multi-story.
If it breaks, he's just saying they gotta have somebody repair
Would
it.
it be
Are these apartments?
Yes. It's a single-loaded car on Hunter.
So just quick on the elevators, would there be a primary, or they're both running, is it a lead lag type of thing?
No, they both run.
They both run?
They both run.
Okay.
I mean, he's providing parking for
No, I
who's ever gonna
understand
live
that.
in his apartment,
I
so
understand that.
he's made accommodations so that the cars aren't gonna be parked all over the village of Ossining,
Or all over the site. I mean, the thing is this,
all over the site.
Yeah.
we removed a lot of the concrete on the site so that we still have the soil there
I see,
to absorb.
you're making a lot of
Right,
green.
it's a lot of green to
So,
absorb.
so let's go back to the green. You are one of the principals of the company that is building this building?
Yes.
What is the problem with you demolishing that old building?
We've been asked to preserve it.
I'm not talking about the house, I'm talking about, have you been down there? Have
Yes.
you been to the property?
Yes,
All right, the building that you did the asbestos removal from,
yes.
why is that eyesore still down there?
We have applied for our permits to remove it, and as soon as we have them, we'll be able to.
You had a permit to remove them, and you let it expire. See, my
Well, you
thing
need- you
is
need to have
beyond, one of the characteristics here is, is it an undesirable change produce the character of the neighborhood? You show almost a contempt for that neighborhood by leaving that building like that, and leaving those grounds like that. It's disgusting. That was in my neighborhood, I would have the neighborhood would be up in arms. It's terrible. And if that's an example of the work that you're gonna do, you talk about green space, go down there, take a ride down there before you go home tonight and see what it looks like down there. It's disgusting. And you want us to give you variances. Horrible. horrible place.
Do we have a picture of what you're talking about, or no?
Take a ride over there.
Can I see
It's
the-
right on State.
Can I see the site map?
And
I'm
Broad.
just wondering what the,
It's right there.
You want
no,
that?
I'm talking our survey.
Survey?
Well, there's not really that much setbacks based on that.
Off of Hunter Street?
No, it says, basically a minimum rear yard setback can be 20 feet.
This is the existing survey? That looks like it.
Yeah.
You wanna zoom in a certain area?
And how many other existing buildings are on their property?
I'm more
It's
interested.
it was an old factory building that they did asbestos removal from and left the
that
frame
look out at the
there
river.
rotting with just the frame. And there's a mansion that they're not taking care of that they're supposed to restore. And I guarantee you, that mansion, that has got to be a stipulation in anybody's approvals for this property, that gets restored.
That was
is.
given a permit at one point, that also expired.
A permit to do what? To restore the
To
building?
renovate the Smith Robinson.
Mhm.
And with regard to Smith Road, I know that there's gonna be a time, the HPC is gonna go back to
Right.
see what's going on there. But Christine, answer to your question, next to the Smith Robinson house is what was the Printex factory.
Right.
That's the building, I think, that the
Yes.
chairwoman's talking about, which if you go by, is
I don't know how
essentially
old this
open
map
to
is,
the elements.
Tracy?
This one?
Yeah.
That one, is there a date down here that I just can't read, like,
I
over
can't
there?
make it out there.
It's just too small. This is probably
Is that it right there?
2012 or 2016,
16, I'm probably sure,
16?
with the containers there, yeah.
Yeah, and actually, just to let you know, those containers, for a while, that, we've written up numerous violations to this property for maintenance. And actually, the containers that were put on the property were a use that was never approved. It was obviously being a storage lot for rubbish removal and containers that never went through any type of planning approval to do such.
And that was written up.
That was written up as violations as well.
There was also commercial vehicles being parked.
Commercial vehicles parked there.
There was a
Park
commercial
The-
vehicle
the
there
ma-
yesterday.
The maintenance of the property, of just
The grass, the,
we issued a demolition permit for the building back, I believe, in 2016, that had now expired. Asbestos was removed, but the building obviously was never taken down. There was a permit issued to remodel the Smith Robinson house, and that also expired. And that's the
That's
condition
what
of the
it looks
building
like.
today.
Christine, it's the building to the left that.
And the building to the
chair
right is the one
talking about.
that's being, that's the
That's
historic
the
building.
Building to the right is the Smith Robinson house.
Right.
Well, so where are they proposing that this new apartment
it
building
goes
be?
way
There?
back. Yeah,
Oh,
it goes
in another-
back,
In
yeah.
another area?
Well, it's part of that,
I
but
think
it's.
it butts up to the mansion, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. One of the,
Well-
building two,
Building 1 butts up
oh,
to the mansion.
building one.
It's to the right of the mansion.
But,
I don't
yeah,
know, you're changing pictures because
Yeah.
the
No,
other
that-
picture,
I moved it and it changed the.
okay, because this is
That's
the
where.
That's what
pigsty
it was.
that it looks like now.
That's a more recent picture.
Yes,
That's more recent. Down the street, the Google must not be updated.
Right.
I think I've said that thing.
well, that's,
Yeah, this shows the property right here, this,
Right.
and the apartments, there'd be one located about here, here, and over here.
Would you like an opportunity to be heard?
Are they two separate properties, or are there one deed?
They were
three-
two separate parcels.
Three lots,
Yeah,
three
three
separate
lots.
deeds?
Yeah.
yeah.
I think there's an obvious concern of past practices here, and things that were supposed to be done and haven't been
well,
done.
let Marcel's correct. Let the gentleman speak.
Well, yeah, and who's gonna wanna get in an apartment and rent an apartment there if it's next to an eyesore?
No, it isn't.
No,
He's
that's
supposed to
gonna
take
come
that
down.
down.
Oh.
He was supposed to take it down, what was it, maybe 3 years
3
ago?
That was issued for
That's
demolition.
looked like that in that neighborhood for 3 years. Yes, sir.
The issue we had, and you're correct, is that until the permits were issued, we can't get our construction financing, and so we have not the ability to complete that work without the funding required. We were at the cusp of getting those, the permits were applied for, and it went back and forth between the building department and the architect, and then it was decided that the plans would be reviewed by was it the ICC?
Yes.
The ICC. And then we had a number of administrative kerfuffles because I believe it was the first time that the village is sending a property like this to the ICC.
No, that's not.
Oh, it
We
was-
send all commercial projects of this size to the International Code Council to do the reviews because, one, they are the people who write the codes, and two, they provide that service that we don't have the ability to do.
Oh, no, I agree that's appropriate, but there was some back and forth in terms of whether they'd accept plans, whether they had to be in
Well,
printing.
because you wanted to submit the plans for foundations only, and the
That was one issue.
International Code Council will not
Right.
review a permit for just foundations with not knowing what's gonna go on top of it.
Correct.
So, and actually, no plan review would do that. If they don't know what type of, if it's gonna be concrete and steel, how many stories, the layout of it, if they don't know, they couldn't review a plan to do foundations.
I agree.
And that's what held that up for a little while.
Yeah, there were a number of holdups, that was one of them.
And then you submitted the entire project complete. We sent it to them in about, going on almost a year ago, and they had a bunch of comments about revisions that needed to be taken care of, and they were never addressed.
That's when the permit expired.
Why don't you sell
During
your
that
other two
period.
parcels?
Sorry?
Why don't you sell your other two parcels?
No, it's all one development.
Oh, it's one development.
It's all one development, it combines all the parcels.
They own the 3 lots.
But they're three separate lots.
They're 3 separate lots, but it's going to ultimately be, yeah.
It's gonna be
Right
ultimately-
now, it's 3 tax lots.
Right, but apparently you want him to demolish something on one lot, you want him to refurbish or restore a mansion on another lot, and then he wants to build apartments on lot 3.
No.
No, this is,
No, you're
All
totally-
going to
it's all
be,
one- it's
all
one
gonna
piece
be
of property.
one big project, so he has to, these are the steps he has to take, that he should have started a long time.
I apologize, because I'm new here.
Yeah.
Oh, it's fine.
So the apartments, it's 189 units, it's an enormous building. So it's going to be, or buildings, and it's going to be on all 3 properties. So his open space would then be would be quote unquote his open space, right? So in order to get to the point where he can build that, he needed to do his asbestos abatement, which he didn't. Left the buildings in that chaotic state, got several violations because I drive by there maybe 2-3 times a day, okay? And the grass, he's gotten it for grass, he's gotten it for garbage, he's gotten it for different vehicles on the property, whether they be, whatever they are, right?
Containers. commercial
Containers,
vehicles.
boats, there was boats on the property. And to me, that is a reflection on how you feel about your neighbors. Okay?
If I may, in my own defense, I've been in the development business for 50 years, and I live and have always lived in buildings that I've developed with neighbors in my building. So I very well stand by what I build. I stand by it fully. And I will
Then
stand
why
by
are
this
you
one.
doing? Why did you do this to this neighborhood?
I haven't built it yet. It is a site.
You are responsible for those properties,
And-
okay? You are responsible to take down that building, and even if you came to us and said, you know what, I can't rehab the mansion until I get my construction loans, totally understandable. You took out a demolition permit and you let it expire to take down the part of the building that you did the asbestos, that is total rust now. It's horrible. It is horrible. So a good neighbor would constantly be working on their property. The last gentleman was here. He doesn't let his property get out of control. He keeps it cut. He does all that he should do to keep it looking neat and clean, like you would expect anyone to do. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about being a good neighbor later. I'm talking about being a good neighbor now.
I believe that we have responded to all of the citations, and I believe now we have located the right local contractor to keep the property maintained. I believe right now, the grass is cut, the sidewalk overgrowth has been cut back, all of the citations, I believe, have been complied with. And yes, We have failed previously.
Well, that's a factual matter. Is that in fact the case? Have all the citations been addressed?
A good portion of it has been, but, I mean, the condition of the site and the building is a violation. I mean, the building is not secured. It's, you know, it's exposed to weather elements that's just gonna continue to deteriorate.
He's talking about the mansion, which is the stone, the one with the Sing Sing brick, you know, on the stone building?
No, he's talking about the,
And the structure.
Well, and the
itself,
structure
and
itself,
everything.
yeah, that looks like whatever the picture, you saw the picture.
And the portion that hasn't been addressed, any reason why, the delay?
Of the demolition?
it's a financial issue. We need to get the permit to get the money to do the work.
Well, how can
But you had the permit for demo.
They applied for a permit for demolition, they were issued the permit, and they didn't take the building down.
We need the permit for construction to get the construction financing. The demolition is part of that. It's other piece.
If we grant these variances, what's to say that you're not gonna go back to treating this property like crap?
I have to go forward now. It costs a fortune. I have to get this done. I have to get it built. I have to get it rented. There's no question.
I think there's gotta be conditions.
Yeah.
There's gotta be a lot of conditions to this.
There were when the prior ZBA considered this.
There's not one person on this ZBA that was on the prior.
And I wasn't saying it for that purpose.
No, I understand that.
Just because-
I just want to
but
make that clear to the gentleman.
That's correct. And, you know, Greg, in response to your question, I mean, that's one of the things you put on of various conditions. In terms of, and what I can say, Marcel, is I do not believe there's any pending court matter at this point. I think all the, in that sense, that doesn't mean that new ones might not be written, but I think as of right now, there's nothing that's currently pending in the Justice Court with regard to that. I think that, you know, and we've had this discussion here, Madam Chair, perhaps we could just spend a little bit of time on the specific variances they're actually asking for,
Right.
which relate to both parking and building size.
Height.
Because, building height, because ultimately that's, you know, part of what your determination is gonna have to be. So, you know,
I
it may be.
just have one last question.
Please.
So all the stars align. We grant them their variances. He gets his permits. Can a condition be put in there for a timeline on a TCO to be ready on a building,
Well,
pending
two
a
things.
hurricane?
One, once you grant the variances,
Mhm.
it then goes back to the planning board,
Okay.
who still has to give site plan and conditional use approval. And they can put, as it's a conditional use, they can put conditions on what needs to be done.
Right.
We have in our code by which point they have to have their CO once the building permit was issued.
Okay.
Here, the issue initially was that these boards, your board, planning board, EAC, gave all their approvals, and yet no building permit was obtained, so that lapsed there. Once they get the building permit, Joe, correct me, they have a certain period of time within which to basically, for purposes of zoning, they have to actually really start showing work within 6 months.
Yes.
Otherwise, they have to come back. For site plan, it's a year, I think. or
They have to pull a permit for the zoning variances to still be current in 6 months. And in planning, they have a full year.
Right.
So
Well, they still have to go
essentially,
before the
they have-
village board too, right?
They need the village board, that's, in fact, there's a public hearing tomorrow night, because that's with regard to the waterfront special use permit, which is because of the zone that they're in. So they have that. They appeared before the EAC earlier this month, and I know that the members of the HPC will be doing a tour at some point of the Smith Robinson House. So what you've got is multiple boards involved here. But you can certainly put conditions, I mean, as Joe already said, we have provisions in terms of when they have to get it done by. And if they, for example, let's say they don't pull their permit within 6 months of your approval, they're gonna have to come back here.
Right.
And you would have to then, you know, they'd have to explain to you why they haven't gotten it at that point. And what they haven't done.
Why are they going before the village board tomorrow?
Because one of the things they've asked for, Marcel, is in the zone that they're in, they need a special waterfront permit for the density that they're seeking. And under the code, only the village board can grant that permit. So the board has already scheduled a public hearing for tomorrow night. And once that hearing is closed, and I'm not saying it's closing tomorrow night, the board would then have 62 days to issue its decision. But planning cannot act at all until zoning makes its decision on the variances. So planning is sort of held in abeyance at this point, based in terms of how the code
So, so what we're talking about is that the people that live on State, James, those are the most affected, Broad, have to live with the conditions of that place. And if you're talking about 62 days, you're talking about a planning board approval, and they don't plan on taking that building down until they get their permits, then we're talking about maybe 3 to 6 months. So we're talking about another summer of people in that neighborhood into the fall, living with that place.
Do they have the right to set a condition based on the variance that they would have to pull a demo permit by, say, less, say, 2 months, 3 months? Is that not a condition?
Well, he has to get his funding though. I mean, you see, he can't start to build until he gets all his ducks in a row first,
Right.
so.
I mean, it's confusing because tonight, Mr. Lehman, just so you know, and it's nothing to you, but in the past, we had been told that they were getting the permit for the demo at least. Now, it may well be that if it's delayed for that reason, now, the only thing is from a village building department perspective is in terms of, there may be additional, violations potentially with regard to the condition of that building. We do have a vacant building registry, and the vacant building code that the village recently passed does require that the building be secured.
And they did they did do the application, but obviously part of it would be to secure it, they haven't.
Okay.
But they have paid the fees, and they have put in an application and the information about the registry.
So even if the building were not taken down at this point, they are obligated by code to secure it, which would mean
Nail
essentially
plywood all over it or
closing it up. Yeah,
something,
we have
close it up.
particular ways to just basically board it up.
Board it up, you'd have to board it up. That's what I'm
That's
guessing.
what
Probably would be
That's what I'm
cheaper
guessing,
to
you'd have
take
to
it
board it
down.
up.
It could be.
Could be cheaper to take it down.
Yeah,
Plywood's pretty cheap.
The demo permit would permit them to demo.
Yep.
But-
Not the stone.
Can I finish?
Yeah.
Before I lose my train of thought, there's a lot going on here. So they get a demo permit, they can, tomorrow, they can go the next day, boom, demo.
Correct.
But what I'm hearing is, he's not even entertaining that until he gets his building permit because of financial. So, but theoretically, they get a demo permit, they could go in a demo. They could drop that building.
To do the demolition is not contingent on any site plan.
Right.
Correct, correct.
So they could, if they want, they
But
could
he's
pull a
leaning,
demolition permit tomorrow.
he's leaning on it sitting that way because he wants the building permit so he can go for his finances. And I think that's, you've developed for 50 years, I have a problem swallowing that you can't get a demo permit and demo that building. So I think we need to go back to the variances at hand. That's my opinion.
Okay. So let's talk about the variances that he's looking for here. Number 1, an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or a deterrent for nearby properties will be created by granting the area variance. So,
On the one hand, we've got the parking one, and then
Yeah,
the
the
other one, we've got
parking
the.
Yeah, which one do you want to consider
Yeah.
first?
let's consider the parking one first,
Okay.
because that's the
Okay.
more, that's the,
But if I'm correct, the parking is just with the size of the space.
Yes, and the
Right.
aisle.
Not the number of parking spaces.
Right.
It's because of the type of system, they don't have to.
It's just
And
a
that's-
small
that's a
parking
9
space.
Doesn't have to be tandem,
Doesn't
so
have
they
to
can
be.
Right.
basically.
but I certainly believe that this brings up the question of the traffic study, if it's 90 seconds or 45 seconds for each car to come out. I know that you want, as many properties around do want transit-oriented parking, properties, that's not exactly what happens. And we've seen that in other places around that either supply a shuttle to the train, or you can walk to the train and yet there's cars everywhere. So So that's why,
Who got the traffic study, if I might, excuse me? Did the planning board get the traffic study or it came to us?
no, they didn't do one.
No, they're
It was part of the
the
original,
original DEIS.
yeah, which,
And who's the lead agency?
Planning board,
Planning
yes.
Right, so
And
planning board is considering all this. We don't have it.
right, yeah, in March, the planning board adopted supplemental findings, which re-adopted the findings from 2014, because there's been no changes to the project, there's no changes in circumstances,
Okay.
which is
Well,
what
there
they
is changes,
determined.
there is changes in circumstance, there is changes in the neighbors. You have the children's center going in there with their, and you have that, what is
25
it,
State.
25, is it 25? I didn't know the number. I was gonna call it the green building. The 25 State Street, so there is changes. While we are not lead agency and we are not looking for the traffic study, we can use that, we can say that, do we want to have a place that has 238 small spaces that pop up? We're allowed to question that as the zoning board.
You're also an involved agency.
Right.
So you have, go ahead, I'm sorry, Amy, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's how many spaces we're required to have under zoning. We could, and the original plan was to have surface parking. But it was determined back when they were designing this project and going through the environmental review that eliminating surface parking would provide over an acre of green space on the property. And so as a result, putting in this automated system decreases the required excavation, and it's a much more sustainable way to park cars. It's really where the future is going. And so as a result, you know, that's why these variances came up, is so that we could do this automated parking and fit more cars in a smaller space, and therefore not have an entire parking lot on the site.
I have been involved in this since day one, and I have never seen a plan with parking up on top. It's always been this elevator system. So I just want to make that statement.
Okay.
Okay, so,
Well, my apologies if you've answered this, but the 246 parking, what does that take into account? Does that take into account visitors? What does that take into account?
There's a zoning, there's a parking table there. It basically takes into account what's required for the dwelling units. And we also, as part of our application to the planning board, the conditional use permit is for live workspace. So that doesn't require additional parking for the Smith Robinson house, which will be used as office space, about 7,500 square feet of office space. So really the parking is related to what's required under the code for the dwelling units.
For the residents.
Yeah.
Bare minimum.
You have a question, what do we do with visitors?
what do you do with the office space?
Well,
Where are the office people gonna work? I mean, park.
well, they'll park in the garage. There's gonna be well, the idea is that some of the residents will use the office space. Also, the residents who are leaving for the day will open up parking spaces for the office staff to park. And that's part, I mean, it's under the code. It's in the code to have this live work use, so.
Okay.
Well, I think,
I would, I mean, my thought was, its office use, live, work would mean if I live there and I also have an office there, I can use the parking, so that, I don't know.
I need to check the definition within the code there. But Marcel, to answer your question, our bulk requirements lay out, in other words, for one bedroom, it's supposed to have X number of spaces, and efficiency, this is.
Even in
fact-
transit.
Yeah,
oriented-
within the PW zone, which is where this is, for residential, it's one space, 4 units that are efficiency or studio, one space for one bedroom and 1.5 for 2 or more bedrooms. So that's how you figure your calculation, that's just,
And they meet their,
you just
they meet the
multiply it out,
requirements.
right?
Yes,
so we're basically just looking at the size of the space right now.
Right, right.
exactly.
Yeah,
Which is this automated system, which makes sense, I get it. You know,
It's It's a smaller footprint.
Oh, yeah, no, I get it, I've seen it.
There are some municipalities that actually waive the, City of New Rochelle waives the parking requirements, the dimensional requirements for the space if it's in an automated garage.
Right.
The benefits sought by the applicant can be achieved by some method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance. So
He can have
we've thought
on-site
that.
above-ground parking. He has another option, but he's choosing this option.
The request of the area variance is substantial.
It's substantial.
I'm asking.
It's instead of a parking space
What's
with
the
extra
total?
room on each side,
What's the
you're
total
gonna
dimension
squeeze
of
cars in.
a parking
There you
space?
go.
Yeah.
Right?
So we're asking for,
You won't have to.
they're gonna
You won't
be 7.5 by 17, as opposed to 9 by 18.
So you're looking at
So it's about 1.5 by a
18
foot on
one
each
side and a
space.
foot on the other side.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't believe
And
it's
the aisle
so.
space also.
Right.
Yeah, the aisles, there's also a significant difference in the aisle space. They're
Um,
looking for a 2.67-foot parking aisle with, for variance with 90-degree angle, where otherwise it would be a 24-foot wide aisle for that, because again, with the nature of the way they're
The
doing that.
sleds.
Right, the sleds.
May I just ask a question? When you calculated out the number of parking spaces, that was just done by the actual parkings? So the Smith Robinson house is gonna be used as office spaces?
Right. So,
What are you doing in calculation for parking? for
so
that?
that's part of the live-work conditional use. It's basically shared parking. There's no additional.
Okay, because when I'm looking at the definition of live work on the office uses, it says an office or studio located within the same dwelling unit as the primary residence of the proprietor. In this case, the people who are going to be using those offices are not the people who live there, I'm assuming, and it's not within their dwelling unit. So you would have to calculate, what I would think is office space general, one space per 400. So,
Or add additional parking space for that mansion space.
well, it specifically says in this PWC that it has to be one space for 400 square foot of gross floor area. So I would assume that the number of parking spaces, when you total it all out on the site, would be more than what you're proposing. Is that correct?
The way Ed Vogel again,
Yeah.
the way our parking table is designed, and you can see it on the sheet, if you can zoom in the lower right-hand corner,
Yep.
I'll go in more.
keep going down,
Is it down further?
yeah, and zoom in too, yeah,
Down
right
here?
there at the bottom.
Okay.
So what we're working on here is,
Oops.
just as it says, one-bedroom units, one space per unit, and there's 70. And then you have two-bedroom units, and it's 1.5 spaces times the number of units, ends up being 178, equals 249 units, parking spaces, I should say. That does not take into account office because it's shared. If we look at 1 per 400 for the office, we're speaking about a total of 18 parking spaces. So if we have 249, the ratio of people going to work, creating open spaces during normal working hours would certainly cover the 18. And that's how it was viewed before.
Well, I suppose if somebody didn't have a place to park, they'd let you know.
It certainly would.
Well,
I think the only question that I think Joe is raising is that it may require another variance, because if the code is, and it depends perhaps how the code's interpreted, but if the code is that this is not live work because it's actually the separate building, and then you're doing one space per 400, which as Mr. Vogel said would be an additional 17, then, and they have 249, they may be short spaces. That's,
But we don't have that in front of us, the number of spaces.
No.
The only thing we can consider is, do
well, we
they
have the two,
it?
no, what I'm saying, you're right, Christine, but the point is, we only have the 249 in front of us, which is based upon the number of living units.
So the space per spot is based on the 249 spaces in this garage, or is it just the way?
Well, they're
the
saying
mechanical system
249
works?
covers what they're proposing for
What do
the
you
parking.
use to cover for
I understand.
the
Well, we won't have any parking based on the way they're interpreting. And what I'm reading in the code here says that if they did the numbers and went one space for 400, as the code says for a general office use, they would have to provide 18 more spaces. So you would also have to consider one more variance for 18 spaces.
Well, his premise is that I take my car out at 9 AM and
It's
I
his
go to
premise.
work.
His premise
And
doesn't,
For
is not,
18.
that's not what the code says, though.
That's not,
Well, what,
It's not
when
what
they
it
made their application, why didn't somebody tell them they don't have enough parking?
Well, it's part of the original approvals, which were, nothing has changed, so we've been, the approvals that expired were the variances, the site plan and conditional use permit, and the Board of Trustees special waterfront permit. So the original approval for the planning board, the site plan and conditional use permit, included what the conditional use permit was for the live work, and so that was the shared parking. So that was how it was originally approved, and that's
So the
how
planning board person told you, you have enough spaces for your plan.
right, yeah, yes.
Okay.
And so we've just been
That is not
requesting the
before,
same.
that's not really before us, the number of spaces.
No.
I don't think that that's a planning board decision to just say, take the zoning code for parking requirements and just say you don't meet that and we're just gonna say it's okay. You'd have to send it to the zoning board for variance.
So the number of spaces, are they
And to be
here in
honest
front
with
of
you,
us?
whether or not it was granted before, the fact is that zoning variance is null and void. And you're here asking for new variances again. So if it was misinterpreted by the previous zoning board as a live-work unit, from what I'm reading here, that doesn't apply to this situation, and therefore, you can say, if it was granted in the past, the fact is you didn't act on it, and today you could say, you know what, you need to provide 18 spaces based on.
That was required.
Or come back
Wait,
and
what
ask
was
for
the
a variance.
variance, excuse me, what was the variance that expired that you got from the prior zoning board?
So it was for the 5-story building as opposed to 4-story, the additional story, and then the parking aisle with the amount of parallel parking spaces in a row and the parking space dimensions and angles inside the garage.
They never had a variance for the number of cars already. That was not here before.
So it doesn't, two wrongs don't make,
All that they had before was dimensional,
Dimensional.
because there was never an inquiry as to the number of spaces. So you're right, before, it was dimensional, and in fact, if you look at the earlier resolution, there's a little confusion, because in the earlier resolution, it talks about a 1.5-foot parking space with variance for 231 spaces, and a 1-foot parking space length variance for 24 spaces. Now, and I'm not putting words into your mouth, if you add that together, that's actually 255 spaces. So, which is different than the 249, but in any event, there was never an application for a quote parking variance. What there was a dimensional variance with regard to the parking. So, but if in fact it requires an additional thing, that may be something they have to look back themselves. It's not before you right now,
It's not.
because right now all that's before you is dimensional. But the question would be, at some point, if they need those number of spaces, that's not something zoning
have to
can
come
just.
back.
Because zoning can't waive that. I mean, not zoning, planning
Planning.
can't waive that at all. That would have to come to you, because,
But Stuart,
Yeah.
that is so integral. Can we move forward without knowing whether or not we can grant that variance, or?
well, the point, Marcel, is you could grant the variance, but the application is not before you. I think the position that, because I know that, and Annie, correct me if I'm wrong, the applicant is relying on their prior application. And the prior application, from what I remember, and having looked at it, there was never a request for a variance in terms of number of spaces. The variances that came before this, the predecessor to the board here, these members, was for dimensional requirements for the parking, for the automatic system, and for the height of the building. So the question now is, even if all that were approved by this board, they may still have to come back ultimately because they may be short in the number of spaces. They may still have to get a variance for let's say 17 spaces, unless they have a place to put those 17 spaces.
Or
That-
they can
that's
devise another way to park 17 or 18 more cars.
100%
If
correct.
down the road, it looks like that's what they need. They can build, it looks like they have a lot of space near that, where that mansion is called. And you could just do some above-ground parking by the mansion for 15 spaces, get a variance for 3 spaces, whatever.
Well, let's put it this way, if the proposal was to come for a building permit the way it is right now, I would deny it for the fact of not having the proper amount of parking spaces, and it will come back to the board here
But
again.
you don't want to prejudge anything,
Well,
because
if
it's
they
not
don't- if
before
they-
you right now yet, right?
Right, but if they, when this project is proposed the way it is right now, the way it's presenting to the board.
The way that they're
figures that are
presenting it
done.
as the same as before.
And they can choose to do one of two things, either apply for the variances to the 18 spaces, well, actually 3 things, provide the additional parking, or if they disagree with what I'm interpreting, they can come back here to the board and ask for an interpretation
That's from the horse's mouth.
of what is considered an office use live work.
But they're not there yet. They still have to leave here, they still have to go back to the planning board.
Well, their choice is they can add it as an additional variance requested now, and this way they, if you vote and you approve it, it would
But
be
they
covered.
can't, they have to put their application in, we can't just, we just
But
can't.
they could look
Adjust
for
the
spaces for the other parking some
Or
way,
create
like,
the spaces.
like Christine said, is to find another
Yeah,
spot to
but-
place those.
But we can't consider it now, it's not before us.
Right.
It's not before us at
Okay.
this point.
So I
You
think,
can't take it upon yourself to do something that we don't have in front of us,
That's correct.
unfortunately.
so I think what has to happen now is that in order that we don't continuously have people coming before us over and over again, which is part of what we've all worked very hard on in the past, I would strongly suggest that you decide what you're going to do about your 17 spaces, 15, 17, whatever the,
18.
18.
it's 18 spaces, okay, 18 spaces. And we can,
We don't know that for a fact.
Well, he
Do you
just
believe
done
that
I'm
that was
just-
He's just
He doesn't have it in front of him at this point. They could go back after today and
He
these
just did the math.
variances, and before they go to him, they could have a different plan.
Well, if they choose right now to make a new plan to add the additional 18 spaces, I would guess they would have to propose that, because that would have to go to the planning board as an approval.
so Christine, we're not, what we're telling, what, this is a strong suggestion, is that they decide what they're going to do with their 18 spaces. If it's going to require another variance, put all the variances together, have us vote on all the variances, and if you get going in a timely manner, you can have this done in the time frames that we set for the next month. We're not, you know,
But we have 2 variances in front of us today.
so we can adjourn those.
Because he just said he would not approve anything
Right.
based on what's being put forth right now. So
The
this is
problem right
this is
now
moot.
is
This is
he's not
moot.
gonna approve.
So this is,
We have 2 applications from the applicant, so.
Adjournment.
we can adjourn them.
Just adjourn them.
We would have to renotice them. This would be a new
You have to
notice, it'd be a
start
new
all
public
over
hearing
again to
because
square one.
this wasn't noticed for this
This
one.
part of this variance was never put on, so they have to renotice it. But
Right.
that's what it is.
So
But they're gonna, if they don't need to do it, if they don't need to do it, they don't have to re-notice, and we've discussed the notification anyway, that we're
Correct.
being a little bit not so overbearing to the owners of the properties, and I say that as a global thing. And then, and he comes back next month, and they come back next month, and they either have these 2 variances, or they have a 3rd variance.
Just speaking with my client, the applicant, we will discuss more with village staff, but it would be our goal to not require a variance for the number of parking spaces. There is a small number of on-surface parking spaces, and we could look into expanding that area so that we do not require a variance.
That sounds like a very easy solution.
Yeah, and so I think, we would just like to limit it to these variances before you tonight and not have to come back for.
We might not even need a variance
Exactly.
for
Or-
additional
yeah.
workspaces, you mean.
So would that mean that would be a change on site plan, correct?
Yeah, it would be a site plan.
Right, but that's.
But that would be the
but that's
planning
the
board.
planning
Right.
board
Right.
wouldn't deal with that. So, do I understand that, Andy, what you'd like to do is have the board consider just the two groups of variances?
Yes.
The parking on the one in terms of dimensional and the height of the building?
Yes.
That is what's before us.
That is, I just wanted to bring us all circle.
There you
But-
go, full circle.
But if there was, if you were, not- if he was not here and you were alone, we would have adjourned this so that you could go and consult with your client. That's, okay. The other thing is that we, as a zoning board, are allowed to put conditions on variances too. And that's where we can come full circle to talking about, we want some, we don't want this to go on forever and leave that, and leave that neighborhood in the shape that it's in right now, because it's horrible, horrible.
So what one do we want to do first, the height? How about let's
So-
leave parking, let's do the height one, let's just change gears.
So-
And these are previously granted.
Yes.
Yeah.
All of these were granted, yes, by the
previous board.
Correct.
But there was,
Okay, so.
okay. So we have before us a variance. Do you want to read the variance?
Let's just see what you've got. Yeah, it's not before. Okay, yes. Let me deal with let's deal with the height first. It's
Yeah,
easier to do.
let's change gears.
They're seeking a variance from section 270-23D1 to permit an increase in the maximum number of stories from 4, which is required under our code, to 5. So that's their first variance.
And it's on the Hunter Street side, which is a steep slope anyway.
Correct.
Yes.
We got that? Right.
Which is called building 2.
Building 2. So there's 3 buildings altogether, right?
Building 2
Okay.
is required.
So building 2 is looking to have a variance of, but you would not be able to see it because
You wouldn't know
it's
from looking
actually
at it
going
because the way it's
down
set up.
a steep slope.
Yeah, exactly. The height of the building is 38 feet, which is under
Right.
the required. It's just the additional story because of the topography.
So it's
You're not
mass
going-
due
you're
to
not
Yeah,
going up.
exactly. It's,
Due
yeah,
to the
it's,
topography.
it's built
So it won't
into.
have an undesirable effect on the neighborhood necessarily?
No, it won't impact any views at all because of the topography, and actually across the street, there's a 5-story building anyways, but we're gonna be lower, our height is lower than that anyways.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Across what street? It's not across the street from you, but it's down the street from you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Madam
Yes,
Chair,
yes, sir.
is there anybody here to speak against? or
Yeah, is
for?
there anyone, well, there's no one here, so that's the only reason.
I'd be curious to know.
This is the longest zoning board meeting we've ever had.
Like this, they're just using the topography to add another floor.
Yeah,
Okay.
but you're absolutely right, Marcel, there is no one here to speak.
Yeah.
We have had people speak on, especially on the parking thing with from James Street in the past. Okay. So let's take this first variance. Do we have again, we'll talk about the conditions after we either approve or deny the variances, but the conditions that we're going to add to these variances, because it's not, there's 2 of them and then there's 2. Okay. So do I have oh my God, I'm getting
Make a
tired.
motion that we
Make a
approve the
motion.
So moved.
We have to do one at a time.
Yeah, to
We're
make a
talking
motion.
about the height of the building.
The height of the
What you want me to
building.
do,
I'll
I'm making a
second
motion
your-
that we approve the height change of the building, of the
I will
variance.
second your motion.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I
Aye.
don't believe it's substantial since,
Okay.
you're only going up
second-
one more story.
The second variance?
Let me read those through. These are the parking ones. I'll read each one, and then I think we can do it collectively because they all relate to parking. The first is a variance from section 270-30A4 to permit a reduction in the minimum permitted width of 231 parking spaces from 9 feet, which is what we require under the code, to 7.5 feet. Next would be a variance under the same section to permit a reduction in the minimum permitted length of 24 parking spaces from 18 feet, which is required, that's the length, I apologize, to 17 feet, which is proposed. There is a variance to permit a reduction in the minimum aisle width for 90-degree angle parking from 24 feet to 21.33 feet. There is a variance, again from section 270-30A4, to permit a reduction in the minimum aisle width for 30-degree angle parking from 12 feet that's required under the code to 9 feet. and there is a variance from section 270-38-2 to permit an increase in the permitted number of tandem parking spaces from 2, which we have now, to 4, which is proposed. So these all relate to dimensional requirements with regard to parking.
Do I have a motion to approve the variance? Is
I have a motion with the presumption that this is for the parking garage only.
That is correct. This is just for the
Right.
underground.
For the underground parking.
Robotic.
The automated parking.
The automatic
I make a
garage.
motion to approve it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Aye.
Motion passed, yes.
Now the conditions on our variances. Number one,
Propose.
yeah, the conditions on the variances that I would like to say.
Go ahead.
Number one, they come up with a plan for the 18 parking spots that is approved by the the planning board.
If required, under the zoning, right?
It's required.
If
He
it
just
is
read it
said.
to you.
It just read
It
it.
would be,
The math doesn't lie, Christine. It doesn't lie. You did the math.
Yeah.
it would require
going back to
the
this.
site plan, and it would go through the planning process.
Planning board.
Okay,
Yeah, from the planning board.
understood.
You just quoted what it was.
Okay, next.
Right.
Okay. What do we want to talk
But
about
are we
then?
directing the planning board to make that a part of their approval? Is that what you do?
We can do that. We can actually, put in the resolution here, that in the approval resolution, which the planning board will get so that they can proceed, is that this board will consider that any additional parking that's required for the Smith Robinson house
Right.
as part of the site plan, as part of the amended site
Okay.
plan.
Then I could go along with that, yes.
Yeah. As far as the property, the existing property now, how can we praise that because of what that's doing to that neighborhood right now?
Well, let me make this suggestion. We do have the code provisions dealing with abandoned buildings, which are very clear as to how they have to maintain the building. And as Joe has pointed out, they fill the applications out for that. But I think that this board could certainly condition, if it wanted to, that the applicant, shall comply with the requirements of whatever the code provision is with regard to, securing the, what was the Printex factory, and whatever has to be done, obviously, to Smith Robinson at the same point.
Right, because the Smith Robinson house, occasionally the windows are opened.
Well, and that's also the one which has the certificate of appropriateness, so it's important there, because that's to be preserved. But I think I'm a little more leery about putting a condition that they must get a demo permit by X date, even though, as Joe has pointed out, the demo permit is not tied to the building permit. But I think to say that they must do what is required under our own village code, which is essentially to secure the building, cover it up, do what has to be done. And keep the area clean and policed, which is also required under the village code. Those are both, I think, those can both be made conditions of your approval.
So if, just so I understand, because of the condition being placed on it, if that's made a condition, is there a time frame to get this into compliance, or once we issue a violation for not complying with these, does that make this null and void?
I think that...
There has to be a time
No,
frame.
no, you're 100% correct. I think that in terms of what we require, which is basically closing it up, and I think you could do that within 30 days of your approval. That's got to be done. I mean, in terms of what they want to do.
Which would coincide with the...
Right. Now, they could, if they wanted to, and if it was not a financing issue, if they wanted to pull a demo permit, they could pull a demo permit. And as Bob pointed out, once it's approved, they can demo. It's not connected to the two. But I think there would be a time frame there. With regard to violations, or in terms of if the area has to be properly policed, I think there's simply something they have to do, and I don't think it would be appropriate to, in essence, void the the variance is if someone throws garbage and we see garbage there. I think the maintenance of the building or the closing it up is a more significant one, and that's clearly in the code. We have a very specific list of what has to be done. And that should be done within a particular period of time. If they're unable to do the demo, then they have to do this, so that it can be simply closed to
Don't
the
they go to
elements.
the justice court on those violations?
That, yes, and in
They don't
fact.
come here, they go to justice court.
No, in
for
fact,
violating, right?
as I indicated before, Christine, currently there are no pending violations in justice court.
No, but
So-
it's, we're not trying to be the
But you're right.
judge and jury. What
No, no.
we're trying to do is say that if you don't do this, then your variances are void.
I can't do that, I couldn't agree to that. I
Okay.
think he can just put plywood on the whole building.
Okay.
That's a better.
Well, we didn't
This is
say-
what we're
but
saying.
That's what we're
We're
saying,
saying
that's
we're
the
not telling
option that
them
they
that's
have.
the condition.
He has the option of
He
demoing it.
already took out the paperwork to have an abandoned building. When you take out that paperwork, you're told that you have to secure the building.
Correct.
So, we're not trying to be the building department or anything, we're trying to say you have to do, you either have to secure the building or demo the factory, not the Smith Robinson house.
You know how long it can take, because how long are our variances good for?
6 months.
If, these will lapse in 6 months if he doesn't move forward with his project.
This is why we
Use
set a
these.
condition on it.
So he either has to knock it down to start his construction and start going around it,
Why don't-
or board it up.
Why don't we do it this way?
It's a
We
6-month
give-
period
well,
we're
why-
talking
But why
about.
don't we do it this, because we've done
It's
this.
6 months of a neighborhood. Do you understand what we're talking about?
How
bad
long
that
has it
is?
been like that?
No, but
It doesn't make it right.
But why don't we,
Well, I know.
why don't we do it this way, because we've done this on some other ones. We give them 30 days. If in 30 days, they have not secured the building as required by the village code,
Which they have filled out the paperwork for.
correct, they have to come back here and explain to you why they haven't done it. And you have the, and let them come to a meeting and say, we couldn't get the plot, something.
plywood, we couldn't get the-
Let them come up with, but what I'm just saying is, let them come back in an open meeting and explain to you why they have not done what they were supposed to do. And then you can, at that point, you
Make our
can
decision.
direct what you have to do.
Okay.
But at least, say to them,
Begin demo as an alternate.
Yes.
Yes.
yes, that's your alternate. At any point, if you wanted to just pull your permit, demo it, there's no,
Not the
not the
Smith
Smith
Robinson.
Robinson, we
Not
know.
just, but keyword there is not just begin demo,
Yeah.
do the
Well,
demo.
that's the question I'm gonna say.
And
because
removal.
once-
Because you pull one beam down,
Once you pull
you
the
begun
demolition
demo.
permit, you
How long do
technically
you
have
have?
a year.
1 year.
Right.
So you'd have to set, in this particular case, a condition to say it's not just pulling the demo, it's actually pulling the demolition permit and acting upon it.
And
At a
removing
certain
the
time.
debris.
Right.
So you're changing his timeline.
Because if we issue, if it was only 30 days based on obtaining a demolition permit, how law says, once you obtain a demolition permit, you have 1 year to act on it, which would not be one of the conditions that the board is interested
No.
in setting.
Well,
Well, how can he
But
not
as
be
a
similarly
condition,
situated then
like-
to the rest of the people
Well,
that
that's
live
correct.
here?
You have a year
You
to
can't
act
do
on
that.
it, but once you physically start the demo, we could set a condition that, barring a hurricane, whatever, that, it's no reason that in a month's time, in 2 days, it comes down.
But
2 days.
not to preserving, there's interconnections, I have to speak up. There are delicate interconnections, and I'll show the historic people when they come to the tour, between the factory building and the laundry spot. We've got a whole perimeter plan that we have to preserve the Smith Robinson house
Right.
during that demolition. It's not something you just tie a track to and pull it down.
I totally understand it, I'm in construction, I know how
All
it
right,
works,
all right.
But the point is, and I think the major point is the way has sat with nothing done. So I'm of the strong opinion, you pull a demo permit, you're gonna demo it. Let's make that place look a lot better than it does. I know there's contingency factors with the building next door and saying, I get that. But to take out what's sitting there right now, it needs to go.
Or we comply with the abandoned.
Or you comply with the bin, correct.
All right.
We're in agreement?
Yeah, I think so.
So what do we want, so, go back.
I think he has to just tell him to comply with the law.
He shows up in 30 days.
I think you
and-
just
No,
have
if
to
he
tell him to
hasn't,
comply
he
with the
comes
law.
back
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, if he hasn't, I thought,
Well, we
No.
want him to, you want him to.
He's applied for the abandoned building. correct?
Yes,
So in 30 days, he needs to come back and explain to us either it's done or it's not done, or they're ripping the building down.
Yeah, either.
Within a time frame, though, not a year.
if he's, the one thing we have to be careful about is, conditions need to go with the land
Not the owner.
and not specifically to the owner. Now, here.
Well,
we
in
just-
this particular
no.
case, I would have the condition go with the land, because it's there.
But what I would say is this, what I was saying is, we say to comply with the law. If in fact, within 30 days, he's boarded up the building, it would seem to me that he could just provide a letter to you folks, he wouldn't have to
Right.
actually make an appearance. If for some reason it's not done, then come back and explain to you what he hasn't done. If he's pulled the demo permit, then, as Bob says, you know, he's gotta proceed with
Right.
getting the building
In a
taken down.
timely manner.
But in a timely manner, not a year.
Right, well, but the
Under the law.
problem, the difficulty with that is that the law has, we don't have a right to essentially shorten the time for the permit. So if he pulls the permit, and at least starts the process, but I will say this, even if he pulls, and I have to double check this, even if he pulls the permit, and he said he's going to be demolishing it, he still has to comply with our vacant building code.
Whether it's not demolished.
Yeah,
It has to be a safe space.
Right.
Right,
So-
absolutely.
so I think that, you know, he's
Not
got
safe now.
he's got to comply with the specific chapter that's in the code in terms of chapter 162, whatever the
He
subsection is.
needs to basically secure the building and make it weather tight. So whatever is the provisions of making it weather tight.
Weather tight?
Yeah, weather
Not a
tight.
building you're demoing?
Yeah, so this
If-
way the
well-
building
Well,
doesn't
if he
threaten
doesn't, if he
interiors.
wants to take his year to demo, then he has to make it weather tight, which means he has to board it up.
Board it up,
Because
top
it's
the
certainly
roof.
not weather tight now.
No.
It's gotta be
I'm sorry.
it has to be the cost of demoing it.
It would mean sealing the building,
I
say
can see
one-way
that.
plywood, topping the roof to keep it
Maybe
weather
I'm
tight.
out of place, I can see that from the mansion. I don't
Yes.
see it for that, or eyesore, but
I agree.
what it is, what it is.
The option is
I think the
to
eyesore
do
is
that or
warranted.
demo the building.
Not for
Yeah.
existing
You know,
It's ugly.
hey, wait, I don't know where that gets us.
Yes.
You're
Yeah.
So-
blurring the lines of the two.
What's going on?
Go ahead. We're okay.
So
I got you.
the condition that we want, so say the condition that you're going to write. So because it's been like, you know,
It's like I'm doing a resolution. The applicant will comply with chapter 162 section, and I'll put the section in, of the village code with regard to securing and maintaining, a vacant or abandoned building pursuant to the village code. And that he is to undertake that within 30 days from the date of the resolution, which effectively is going to give him actually a little bit more time, because we don't
he
generally...
has an extra month.
He gets an
because
extra
we
month.
don't even do the resolution.
And if that's all complied with within 30 days, and that would be determined by the building department, because they would actually go over and do an inspection, then there would be no reason for the applicant to return to this board. If for some reason the building department determines it has not been accomplished, then the applicant would have to come back here and explain essentially why he hasn't done it, and why it has not been done, and then the board can look at it at that point. Alternatively, he could pull a demo permit, as we've said before. And then he would be pursuant to whatever our requirements are for demo permits, time requirements and everything like that. So he has, those would be his two options to do it. And that would be the condition there. And we also talked about that we would let the planning board know, because there would be a revised site plan with regard to whatever additional parking spaces may be needed for that other building for the live workspace.
Right.
So.
Can I just add one thing? When you say provisions of chapter 162, would you also be able to add in the provisions of New York State's property maintenance for securing the building? Because I don't think our code 162 talks about making it weather tight. And yet the state code says that if you have an abandoned building, you have to actually secure it and make it weather tight, so it doesn't have further deterioration.
If you provide me with the section, I'll be happy to.
Okay.
Thank you. So let's take a vote as to those conditions that we have just gone over now for the last 15, 20 minutes. So,
Thank you, Bob.
so I want a motion to accept those conditions that we're going to be putting on these two variances, or multiple variances, excuse me, because the garage is multiple variances, that we have in
So
front of
moved,
us.
so moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
Mr. Reed.
Okay, adoption of the minutes and resolution from the March 12th, 2019 meetings.
I will say Ovak is here.
No, it's Nick.
But I let him know he could go, but he
Nick,
wanted to
he's
stay.
hanging out because you've got your approval.
I appreciate that. Well, I just wanted to kind of give an update, I guess.
Oh, thanks.
That you paved anyway?
Well, it was before the variance did expire, so
Okay.
thank you. All the other work has been on hold until we were able to get an extension. I know based on the conversation I had with the last meeting, they're canceled and postponed to this meeting.
Yes.
The fence is on track to be installed hopefully this weekend, now that everything's approved for us to continue, so. The work was done prior to the variances.
And we did not have a meeting last month.
Correct, no.
Correct. Okay,
So
That's all.
I appreciate it.
That's all.
thank you.
Thank you for all the work you do.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
See you later.
Adoption of minutes and resolutions from the March 12th, 2019 meeting.
Make motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're going to postpone the discussion on neighbor notifications since the time is late now. But we will send out,
9 o'clock even.
so we will send out, but we will send out we will send out some information on what we're thinking
Right.
about doing with the neighborhood notification, especially if you're looking for extensions and stuff like that. And you, okay? So I want to thank you all. This was a very interesting zoning board meeting. We want to thank Greg Myers. I believe that he'll be, he'll need to resign as of this evening.
Oh, really? Tonight's and last night?
Yeah, yeah.
Why, we
You
can-
too, right?
No,
No.
I'm stuck till.
So, no, December. So I want to thank you all and have a lovely month. We'll see you next month.